Hello, my name's David. I'm reading a story every night this week as part of the City Council's big reading challenge. I want to raise money for the Imagination Library, a charity that gives free books to children in Nottingham. Reading is so important for children, and that's why I'm going to read a story tonight and every night this week. It's called My Father's Dragon by Ruth Stiles Gannett. My father hid in the hold of the ship for 6 days and 6 nights. Twice he was nearly caught when the ship shopped to take on more cargo. But at last he heard a sailor say that the next port would be Cranbury, and they'd be unloading the wheat there. My father knew that the sailors would send him home if they caught him, so he looked in his knapsack and took out a rubber band and an empty grain bag with a label saying Cranbury on it. At the last moment, my father got inside the bag, knapsack and all, folded the top of the bag inside and put the rubber band around the top. He didn't look exactly like the other bags, but it was the best he could do. Soon the sailors began to unload. They lowered a big net into the hold and began moving the bags of wheat. Suddenly one sailor yelled, "Great Scott! This is the strangest bag of wheat I've ever seen. It's all lumpy like, but the label says it's got to go to Cranbury." The other sailors looked at the bag too. My father, who was in the bag, of course, tried even harder to look just like a bag of wheat. Then another sailor felt the bag, and he just happened to get hold of my father's elbow. "I know what this is," he said. "This is a bag of dried corn on the cob." And he dumped my father into the big net along with the bags of wheat. This all happened late afternoon, so late that the merchant in Cranbury who had ordered the wheat didn't count his bags till the morning. He was a very punctual man and never late for his dinner. The sailors told the captain, and the captain wrote down on a piece of paper that they had delivered 160 bags of wheat and 1 bag of dried corn on the cob. They left the piece of paper for the merchant and sailed away that evening. My father heard later that the merchant spent the whole next day counting and recounting the bags and feeling each one, trying to find if the dried corn on the cob was there. He never found it, because as soon as it was dark, my father climbed out of the bag, folded it up and put it back in his knapsack. He walked along the shore to a nice sandy place and lay down to sleep. My father was very hungry when he woke up in the morning. Just as he was looking to see if he had something to eat, something hit him on the head. It was a tangerine. He had been sleeping right under a tree full of big, fat tangerines. And then he remembered that this was the island of Tangerina. Tangerine trees grew wild everywhere. My father picked as many as he had room for, which was 31, and he walked off to start finding Wild Island. It was almost dark when he came to the rocks, but there, way out into the ocean, was a patch of green. He sat down and rested a while, remembering that the cat had said, "If you can, go out to the island at night, because then the wild animals won't see you coming among the rocks, and you can hide there." So my father picked 7 more tangerines, put on his black rubber boots, and waited for dark. It was a very black night, and my father could hardly see the rocks ahead of him. Sometimes they were quite high, and sometimes the waves almost covered them, and they were slippery and hard to walk on. Sometimes the rocks were far apart, and my father had to get a running start and leap from one to the next. After a while, he began to hear a rumbling sound. It grew louder and louder as he got near to the island. At last it seemed he was right on top of the noise, and he was. He had jumped from a rock onto the back of a small whale who was fast asleep and cuddled between 2 rocks. The whale was snoring and making more noise than a steam shovel. So it never heard my father say, "Oh, I didn't know it was you." And it never knew my father had jumped on his back by mistake. For 7 hours my father climbed and slipped and leapt from rock to rock. But while it was still dark, he finally reached the last rock and stepped off onto Wild Island. The jungle began just beyond a narrow strip of beach. Thick, dark, damp, scary jungle. My father hardly knew where to go, so he crawled under a wahoo bush to think, and he ate 8 tangerines. The first thing he decided was to find the river, because the dragon was tied somewhere along its bank. Then he thought, if the river flows into the ocean, I ought to be able to find it quite easily if I just walk along the beach far enough. So my father walked until the sun rose, and he was quite far from the ocean rocks. It was dangerous to stay near them because they might be guarded in the daytime. He found a clump of tall grass and sat down. Then he took off his rubber boots and ate 3 more tangerines. He could have eaten 12, but he hadn't seen any tangerines on this island, and he could not risk running out of something to eat. My father slept all day and only woke late up in the afternoon when he heard a funny little voice saying, "Dear, dear, what a strange little rock." My father saw a tiny paw rubbing itself on his knapsack. He lay very still, and the mouse, for it was a mouse, hurried away muttering to himself, "I must smell Tum Duddy. I must tell somebody." My father waited a few minutes and then started down the beach because it was almost dark now, and he was afraid that the mouse would tell somebody. He walked all night and 2 scary things happened. First, he just had to sneeze, so he did. Achoo! And somebody close by said, "Is that you, monkey?" My father said, "Yes." Then the voice said, "You must have something on your back, monkey." And my father said, "Yes," because he did. He had his knapsack on his back. "What did you have on your back, monkey?" said the voice. My father didn't know what to say, because what would a monkey have on its back, and how would it sound telling somebody about it if he didn't have something? Just then another voice said, "I bet you're taking your sick grandmother to the doctor's." My father said, "Yes," and hurried on. Quite by accident, he found out later he'd been talking to a pair of tortoises. The second thing that happened, that he nearly walked right between 2 boars who were talking in low, solemn whispers. When he first saw the dark shapes, he thought they were boulders. Just in time, he heard one of them say, There are 3 signs in a recent invasion. First, tangerine peels were found under the wahoo bush near the ocean rocks. Second, a mouse reported an extraordinary rock some distance from the ocean rocks, which upon further investigation wasn't there at all. However, more fresh tangerine peels were found in the same spot, which is the 3rd sign of the invasion. Since tangerines do not grow on our island, somebody must have brought them across the ocean rocks from the other island, which may or may not have something to do with the appearance or disappearance of the extraordinary rock reported by the mouse. After a long silence, the other boar said, "You know, I think we're taking this all too seriously. Those peels probably floated over here by themselves, and you know how unreliable mice are. Besides, if there's been an invasion, I would have seen it." "Perhaps you're right," said the first boar. "Shall we retire?" Whereupon they both trundled back into the jungle. Well, that taught my father a lesson, and afterwards he saved all his tangerine peels. He walked all night, and towards morning came to the river. Then his troubles really began. And that's where we leave the story tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. Find out what happens to Elmer tomorrow night. And if any parents or carers would like to sponsor our big reading challenge, please go to the GoFundMe website on screen so we can get even more stories to even more of our Nottingham children. Thank you.